Welcome. In this installment, we're going to switch from having a single enemy to an array of enemies, so we can have multiple enemies, and then we're going to modify the enemy's behavior so that when they're not busy chasing the player, then they just wander, so that they move, so it makes the game a little bit more dynamic. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go into our project, and with that, we're going to set up, so we're no longer using a single enemy. So if we notice we have one enemy, I'm going to comment that out. Now we'll see it does cause error messages. That's good. That's a reminder that we need to do something with that. Now the next thing that we're going to do is go from having a single enemy to having multiple enemies. And with that, we want to set up a value, and this will be our maximum number of enemies. So we know this we don't need right there, and continuing the trend of adding new stuff at the end of my setup, I'm just going to add it down here. So max enemies, we'll set that equal to 25, and then enemies will now be equal to new enemy, and then max enemies. Finally, what we want to do, well, we've got to spell enemies right. E-N-E-M. Oh. And while we made max enemies, we also now need to create that variable object to store that, our array, so we have to make that. And once again, put our brackets on that side of it. And finally, we do have to spell our class name correct. So I apologize for the confusion on that. Doesn't always go smooth when we're coding. So class name, square brackets because it's an array, or array name, enemies. Now, enemies is equal to a new enemy, square brackets, it will have 25 enemies as part of the game. So now, after we've done that, we're going to then simply have a for loop where we populate our array. So then that allows us to populate that. So enemies I, square brackets, equals new enemy, and the constructor for enemy does not take a wow, I keep mistyping that today. That's really bizarre. But it doesn't have any parameters, so that now creates all of our enemies so that we can then add them to our project and work with it. So once we've done that, we're going to go down into here where we have our update and display. So let's see, this is all pickup information here. And this is player and enemy intersect down here. So what we're going to do is just move that so we're a little more consistent here. So this is now, whoop. Over one, there's enemy stuff. Just gonna go here and say pick up stuff. So there's our enemy stuff. So what we just need to do is to wrap all of this inside a for loop. So for int I equals 0, I is less than max enemies, I plus plus, close parenthesis, curly. Actually, don't need to double return curly there. And at the end of this, we will have our closing curly. And all of this code will be indented. So Command or Control square bracket, that moves that over. Now we just need to change where we use E. And what we will say is enemies square bracket I. Just like that. So I can type that or copy paste it. Just like that. So now that adds in, so we have multiple enemies. We run this, we will see now the projectiles are having an issue because we have to now compare every projectile to every enemy as part of it. So we're going to have to run that inside a for loop as well. Because we're using I on this loop here, so what I'm going to do first is, before we mess with this, let's just comment out that whole if there, which was using our single enemy. See, enemy's health went down. We're sending in the single enemy. Now let's run this, and and here, when the enemy's health is there, we're telling the enemy to reset. That probably belongs inside, I don't know, the enemy class. So we might want to just move that over into the enemy class instead, because we don't want to put that, or we can wrap that, we'll move that into probably the projectiles, because the enemy is only hurt by projectiles. So it would make more sense to put it up here where we're modifying that enemy, now that we have more than one. Let's run it and see what happens. And you can see we have 25 of them, and they're all just parked there. And if I move around, okay. And now I keep resetting and can't get out of there, so yeah, that's bad. All right, we'll just stop that because that's painful to watch. So what we do when we put a for loop inside of a for loop, we use a different letter for our iterator. So I'll use J, because if we use I again, then it doesn't know which I we're referring to. And I typed an I because I said the word I. So now we're going to loop through all of the enemies. And right now this is end 4. This is my end if active. Now we just added a curly brace there, so let's return, put in a closing curly. This is end. This is ending our enemy loop. Now we are going to just move that stuff over, uncomment it. We're going to grab this information from here. So the enemy's health, where we're resetting the enemy, let's take that, move that over here. Looks like uncomment, and pull it over a few more. So what we need to do is change it, instead of referring to E, because E doesn't exist anymore, it's enemies, and this time it's J, because remember we were using I for projectiles, so J will be for the enemies. So everywhere there's an E here, that particular enemy's health goes down, but not all enemies. And then if that particular's enemy health is less than 0, then we will tell that particular enemy to reset. So right here, this is going to be that's our end intersect, and this is and health of our enemy. So again, using these comments so we can make sure our curly braces are lining up. If you don't indent properly, it makes it much harder to keep track of your code. So I know this works, but with 25 enemies, it's near impossible. So let's just mark it down to 2. So we have a hope. Okay, there. Now we have hope. And we can fire right here. And it's out of bounds. And it's out of bounds because when I look here, we have J, J, and because I was talking about I repeatedly while doing this, I think I typed an I there, or maybe out of habit I typed an I. Let's try again. Okay, let's move so they're not going, and now I can shoot. Okay, the enemy reset, I reset too. Okay, let's move. Oh, we're out of ammo, so I can't shoot. Hey, look, pickups work. I got ammo back. Let's go get some more ammo. All right, so now we're maxed back on ammo. So we have now proven it works. So we now have multiple enemies. We're looping through enemies and projectiles, so that's all good. So that's phase 1 of adding in our enemies. Phase 2 is we're going to add in a wander behavior.